This is TiiQu Talks. I'm very happy today to be here with Ivan, Ben, who is joining, and Christopher. We will be talking about the wind revolution. I will start by telling a couple of words of about what TiiQu Talks is, and then I will give the stage to Ivan, to Ben, and Christopher, and then we will close with a panel discussion about the future, basically, of wind energy and how this will impact our lives. So welcome to everyone. TiiQu Talks is an initiative by TiiQu. Their aim is to give a stage to skills that matter. All the story and the technologies that TiiQu develop are around trust. Our job is inspiring trust, and our aim through these events is to scout people who have hands-on experience in specific niche area, bring them on stage, allow everyone to hear from people with real experience what is going on in specific niche area, eventually engage in those areas, learn how to engage or what is going on, and eventually also contribute to the TiiQu community by adding skills that matter to the entire ecosystem. Our aim with MyTiiQu is to track and trace available knowledge and measure skills through continuous skills assessment derived from questions that are created by our co-creators of knowledge. We will talk about this on TiiQu if you join, but without any further delay, I think I will give the stage to Ivan. Thank you very much, Ivan. I know that you will be talking to us about the wind revolution in Europe. Let me stop sharing here, and now the stage is yours. So please, Ivan.
Thank you, Laura. Just give me a second so I share my actual screen, which you should be seeing now.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so good afternoon from Brussels. My name is Ivan Komušanac, and today I'm just going to give you basically short introduction into the wind sector in Europe for those who are not too familiar with it. I represent a company called Wind Europe. What is Wind Europe? It's a trade association based in Brussels. We do basically advocacy, so everything related to legislation, regulations, and at the same time we also organize events, conferences, and fairs, basically focusing on the wind sector. We have more than 400 members. Some of them here very familiar companies. So you've probably seen GE, seen Vestas, Siemens Gamesa, Ørsted, Shell. So basically everyone who's involved somewhat in the wind sector is a member of ours. We try to basically capture every value chain of the wind sector. So we don't talk only about investors. We also have component manufacturers, actual turbine producers, financial institutions, research institutes, clean energy buyers such as Google are members, and of course we have national wind energy or national renewable energy associations in Europe. So in short, what's the current situation with wind energy in Europe today? Well, we have more than 220 gigawatts installed, and some 16% of the EU's electricity demand comes from wind energy. So not so little at all. It's actually very significant. Now, if you take a look at per country level, here the blue bars basically show how many gigawatts a country has installed, and the red bar shows what's the percentage those gigawatts cover in the electricity demand in 2020. And you'll see that actually the biggest market for wind in Europe is Germany, and there 27% of the power is powered by wind energy. Second biggest market is Spain, and third, we have the UK. All those countries have more than 20% of the power demand covered by wind energy. But if you take a look at who are the best in terms of integrating large shares of renewables, large shares of wind, that's actually Denmark. With 6 gigawatts, they managed to basically have half of their power demand covered by wind energy. And we have Ireland, which is an island with very limited interconnections that managed to have more than a third of its power covered by wind, basically all of it being from onshore wind, and they're an absolute leader in terms of how they're integrating onshore wind in a place that doesn't have much natural resources for flexibility, such as pump storage. Now, wind, we have basically onshore wind farms and we have offshore wind farms. That's quite interesting for everyone who's in the UK. You've been hearing quite a lot about offshore wind in the UK and the future being that the UK wants to be the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind. Well, the offshore wind is a bit smaller. Currently in Europe, it's only 25 gigawatts installed, covering some 3%. So that comes from this previous figure that I showed. Basically, the UK is the biggest player in Europe today, but we also have a couple other countries in Europe: Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, a bit in Sweden. But we also see many other countries really going towards offshore wind. We see very strong now plans from Poland. We see quite a lot now in France. France is finally building out their first offshore wind farm as we speak. We see strong plans in Spain, Ireland, Greece, Italy. So it's coming up. These are basically the frontiers, the first countries that started, but we're going to see much more other countries in Europe also going to offshore wind. And why is offshore wind so interesting? Well, especially for densely populated countries. There's a lot of room offshore, and the wind turbines are very big. Comparing to the London Eye, these are, let's say, the three most common offshore wind turbines today that are being installed and being ordered. So you have Vestas, Siemens Gamesa, and GE turbines. Absolutely enormous turbines, and they have a growing trend. And every year or two, we see new announcements from wind turbine manufacturers that they developed an even larger turbine, so they can generate more power at the same time, have this benefit of being very remote and not interfering with the visual landscape onshore. So definitely the future in offshore wind, the bigger the better, and we see it definitely going that way. That up until 2030, a 15 megawatt turbine will be a standard, and we see those announcements basically being done already today. Now, where does Europe go basically in terms of long-term visions towards related to the wind sector? Well, the EU has set some new targets recently. We had already more than a year ago a new announcement for 55% greenhouse gas reduction target, and this year the European Commission basically translated that into renewables target, meaning that they want to have 40%. That's the new proposal, that 40% of all the renewable energy should be consumed. 40% of all the energy consumed should be renewable by 2030, and that basically means increasing from 165 gigawatts onshore to 374 gigawatts, and also a very significant increase in offshore wind from 15 to 79. But that's only one small part of the road towards climate neutrality, which is actually even more optimistic. We need to go towards 1,000 gigawatts and 300 gigawatts, so in total 1.3 terawatts of wind energy capacity in Europe. There's a lot of work to be done here. It's not so easy. We've been installing quite a lot already. Luckily, turbines are being larger and larger. They're being more efficient. They produce much more each year. So that's very good. But still, we have to make sure that we use the space in the best possible way. We have very good local acceptance with people who live close to wind turbines. So there is still a lot of work to be done here. Still, we have basically what we need to do is we have to sort out permitting in Europe. That's currently the biggest challenge we have in reaching even the 2030 figures, not even to mention the 2050 figures, because it takes really long time to get a permit for a wind farm today. Now, on the other side, why is wind so being looked at as such a crucial technology to decarbonize the EU's energy mix? Well, already today we have 300,000 people working in the wind sector. All over Europe, we have in Germany, Spain, Denmark, UK, even Romania, Greece, all over the places you have basically the European supply chain, and it's expanding as more and more wind farms hit the ground. And that's definitely why it's being considered a European project compared to, let's say, solar, which at a certain moment lost a lot of its jobs to China. This was not the case with wind. One reason is because it's much more weight intensive than solar, so you couldn't just export the whole industry to another country. At the same time, we had very good installation rates, very good support schemes for wind farms in Europe. So that basically encouraged the industry to stay here. And now basically, if you take a look at the leading manufacturers of wind turbines, the top 5, we have 3 of them being headquarters in Europe. And they are really dominating not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. Europe is a net exporter of wind components. So we export to a lot of places outside of Europe, and European companies have set up shop in the US, in Latin America, and we see turbines being also shipped, being actually designed for also markets in Asia, Africa, and Australia. Now, 2050, one could say this is very far away. What type of energy system are we going to have by then? Is it going to have the same problems that we have today? Well, one chart that explains why do we have such a huge increase of wind energy capacity, although we already cover 16% of the power demand, is electrification. So what we see basically, and what policymakers are also expecting towards 2050, is strong rates of electrification of sectors such as heating, industry, and transportation. There's multiple reasons why. Perhaps the most important one is energy efficiency. It's much more efficient if you, instead of burning oil for a heating process, you have highly efficient electric heat pump or industrial heating process, which is being powered by renewables. At the same time, it reduces your import dependencies on Russia and OPEC countries. So that's why we see quite a lot of electrification, and that's where renewables are going to play their role, because we're going to see a huge, we're going to see overall decrease of the energy demand, but an increase in the electricity demand. So that's why we're going to need much more renewables to power this future transition towards electrification. And of course, you're going to have hydrogen. Hydrogen, there's a lot of talk that you have perhaps seen in the media. Basically, we need to also replace the dirty hydrogen that's being produced today. So currently there is a need for hydrogen, but it's being produced in a very intensive way with methane steam reforming. But it's possible to also produce it in a clean way from renewables. So also we're looking into how to basically power this process with renewables, but this will require a huge increase in wind energy capacity. And towards 2050, that would translate to some 50% being covered by wind, onshore wind still being the dominant one, but offshore wind also playing its important mark. And how does this look in terms of globally? Where does all this European picture fit globally? Well, not so impressive. I would say it's less than a quarter of installations that we expect over the next 5 years, because Asia is such a big market, in particular China, in terms of installing new wind farms. So that's definitely something to take into account, that with a lot of new installations coming from abroad, industry also likes to be looking at where is the market. That's where we're going to have the new value chains, the new job creations. So definitely we need to have high targets in Europe in order to make sure we have new jobs being created in Europe in the wind sector. And lastly, for those who want to stay in touch with Wind Europe, I recommend going to our website and taking a look at our daily wind figures, which is basically every morning you get some info on how much wind energy was generated the night before and what was the percentage of power that was powered by wind in different countries in Europe. That's it by me. So Laura, looking forward to the discussion later on about this.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I think we can take a couple of questions if there is any. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand or tell us. No questions. Very good. So in that case, we go ahead. If you stop sharing your screen, Ivan, we can then move to Chris. Unfortunately, our third speaker seems having huge problems for connecting. So we go ahead with Chris, and then we will manage eventually Ben as the third speaker. Chris, the stage is to you.
Great, thanks, Laura, for the introduction. Let me just share my screen as well.
Well, actually, I didn't introduce you very much, so please just give a little introduction about yourself. I avoided to say anything that you would then repeat. So please introduce yourself, give a little bit of the framework of where you are, what you do, and then we are all expecting your presentation.
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I do have a brief bio slide that I'll go through for my background. But as Laura mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about the skills related to the renewable energy industry that are required to work in this space. I've broadened the scope a little bit, not just wind, but just more generally to renewable energy, as well as the sustainability related skills to work on climate change related issues. So just as a brief outline for this presentation, I'll do a brief introduction of myself. I'll cover some of the industry trends related to skills in clean energy and sustainability. I'll touch on a case study from South Africa, looking at what happened with the renewable energy industry here, where I'm based, and trying to pick some lessons learned for other emerging markets from South Africa's experience. And then we'll end with the Q&A session, I think led by Laura. So just some more background on myself. And my company, Blue Horizon, focuses on consulting, research, and teaching within clean energy and sustainability. The company itself focuses mainly on advisory services in this space, and my background's in engineering, and I've been working in this field for over 15 years now. So I think to start big before we get into the detail, touching on some of the industry trends related to climate change. I think some of the messaging we often hear with climate change is overly negative, and sometimes creates fear in people, which is one form of messaging to convey the seriousness of it. But I think what often gets underemphasized with climate change is the opportunity, the amount of jobs that are going to be created to solve this problem, and how many people we need to solve this problem. So that's what I'll be focusing on. So many of you may be aware of COP26, the next climate change conference that's happening next month. And at that conference, they'll be discussing some of the really important policy and policy goals for climate change in general, which will then trickle down to influence the renewable energy industry and wind industry directly. So it's important to keep an eye on some of those kind of policy level goals that are being set. But then beyond that, I think what I find even more interesting is how you're going to implement the policies, and what projects you're going to invest in, and what solutions you're going to get behind to solve these the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So I think the SDGs do a good job of summing up some of the challenges we see, not just within the climate change industry, but more broadly, the sustainability industry. And when we think about climate change, it's such a big problem. It's very interdisciplinary, and we can't solve it in a silo. So just installing a bunch of clean energy across the world won't actually solve climate change, in my view, and won't solve some of these other bigger issues which are related and also need to be solved in parallel. So I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind if you're interested in working in this space. We don't need people just to work on clean energy. We need people that are experts in all fields and different backgrounds. So keep that in mind. So now going into more detail, specifically within the renewable energy space, Irina sums it up pretty well in terms of the global distribution of jobs, and Ivan touched on this too. But you'll see from the diagram on the left here that most of the jobs within the renewable energy industry to date are in probably more advanced markets, I would say, that have more of a manufacturing base or more installed base for renewable energy to date. So there's still room for growth, not only in those markets, but also in countries across Africa and South America and other economies. So I think there is potential for growth there. And if you want to look at the other diagram, it gives more of an overview of what specific job roles and what segments of the value chain these jobs will likely look like. So you'll see it's kind of a mix of construction, manufacturing, and O&M type jobs within the renewable energy industry. But then beyond that, you also have different people to play different roles within marketing, administration, engineers, workers, and technicians. So there's all types of skills that are required beyond just the STEM related skills that are more technical within this space. And just for some additional free resources for any of the viewers who want to upskill themselves or learn more about this space, here are some examples of education and online resources, which are mostly free. If you're interested in learning more about the space or upskilling yourself to build a career in this field. In general, there's a shortage of skilled workers in the renewable energy industry globally. That varies by market and at what stage of each market is in terms of its development. So it's good to speak to local companies within this space to understand where the skills gaps are locally within the market you'd potentially be working in, to then upskill yourself in those areas. So moving into a little more detail, to use South Africa as a case study, I think if we're speaking about the wind industry, the utility scale projects have been the biggest driver of the market here to date. So since 2011, South Africa has had its renewable energy independent power producer procurement program, which is just a government procured renewable utility scale program. And overall, it's been largely successful up until probably 2017 or 2018, where we had about 6 gigawatts procured from government, over 90 projects across the country with a mix of solar, wind, biomass, small hydro. So some varied projects. And if you looked at the prices from rounds 1 to the later rounds, the prices came down dramatically from specifically for wind and solar. So overall, it was a very successful program in the way it was designed and initially implemented. There were some challenges related to delays after round 4. Some of that was related to political corruption of the former president. Some was related to opposition from the utility monopoly. But I think we're seeing similar trends in other markets globally. The renewable energy industry is still a very political industry. So it's not something that economics alone will sell. We also have to be involved in the political debates related to this industry to keep it moving forward. And we're also expecting round 5, the next round for South Africa, to procure about 1.6 gigawatts with a mix of solar and wind over the next couple years. And if you look at the job creation that happened during this procurement program over since 2011, the last 10 years, most of those jobs have been fairly distributed across the country, depending where the projects are located. So most of the wind capacity has been in the Eastern Cape, and a lot of the solar has been in the Northern Cape of the country, where you see most of the jobs. In terms of the distribution, 80% of the jobs have come from construction. So those are more short-term. Construction lasts a year or so, or a year or two in some cases. And the rest are mostly operations and maintenance. There have been some local manufacturing jobs created as well, but the delays from this type of program have forced a lot of those local manufacturing companies to close down. So we were at one phase manufacturing local towers within South Africa, as well as a number of solar PV module assembly facilities. And unfortunately, they weren't able to remain open and export competitively with some of the other international markets that were able to procure at larger scales and sell at larger economies of scale. So I think that's probably going to be a challenge for other markets as well in terms of other emerging countries. South Africa is a fairly big country, and if it has challenges with localization and local manufacturing, I would expect you're going to see similar trends in other markets that also don't have the steady demand that the European market may have, for example. But that said, there's still lots of opportunity for other jobs within operations and maintenance. And I think if developers are coming to South Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa and looking to develop projects, I think there is responsibility on them to also be upskilling locals and creating opportunities locally for people in South Africa or other countries, and not just bringing in foreign workers and doing all the work and then exporting the profits. I don't think that aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals. And it won't help solve some of the political challenges we see where there's political opposition for the renewable energy industry if it's seen to only benefit international companies and it's not creating long-term local jobs. So that's kind of the key summary from South Africa. Overall, the industry is moving forward, and we're looking forward to round 5. There are challenges though still with the utility here, which makes a stronger business case for more renewable energy to be built here. If you look at the increases in electricity costs that the utility is having, because they still have a monopoly and haven't been able to transition as quickly to a unbundled electric utility. We're still seeing price hikes go up, and we're still experiencing regular power outages here. And both of those things are contributing to growth in the renewables industry. And just to sum up, I focused on the renewable energy industry in this talk mainly, but there is opportunity in other segments of the market. If you're looking at downstream deployment of renewable energy, from users that were driving electric cars to electric scooters, to storage solutions, and even peer-to-peer electricity trading, which can be further enabled with blockchain and other technologies. So I think the space is pretty exciting if you're looking to work in clean energy. We need all the people we can get helping to solve these problems. So Thanks for the time, Laura, and I'll open it up to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Chris. I have a question that comes from our participants about South Africa or emerging countries in more in general. But we say that renewable energy requires or relies heavily on connectivity. So with the 35%, if I remember well, of coverage of internet and connectivity in Africa, how will they be part of it? How will they participate in this? And eventually, and this is a question of possibly for Ivan, I don't know if you can answer. What is the work that you're doing in terms of ethical shareability of renewable energy? Will this be equally distributed, and how? Who wanted to start? Maybe Chris for what concern the emerging countries connectivity situation, and how much this is key to the development of renewable energies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's really important when you're trying to understand the wind industry specifically and where it's going to play a bigger role. For utility scale wind, I think a lot of these projects are getting bigger and bigger. It's not as much of a distributed, easy solution to make it distributed. It tends to just be more expensive if you're building small scale wind, and if you're building it off grid, for example. So I think when you're talking about the wind industry, you're a bit more limited in the sub-Saharan African market in terms of where you would be located and who you'd be selling to. You need to plug into one of the power pools to sell to an off-taker, either a utility or a large industrial customer, most likely. But I think there are other solutions outside of the wind industry that are more scalable. If you look at the solar industry, and even to some extent some small wind installations and hybrid installations using small wind and solar and storage, there is potential to scale that, and some studies have shown that's even cheaper than building out more transmission and distribution infrastructure in some countries. We already can move to a microgrid model in a lot of locations, and it's going to be the cheapest option. So I do think there are opportunities there. It doesn't have to be only utility scale on-grid wind to solve it, but I think we need both, at least in the African market.
Ivan, do you want to add your thoughts?
Maybe I would link mine to maybe two things. One is energy poverty, and basically price of wholesale electricity prices now in Europe, that they've been very high. So you might have seen that many countries have now been changing the last weeks their legislation in order to basically limit the price on the wholesale market price of electricity, and everything with the same basically aim to for end consumers, so for households to have a lower bill, not a higher bill of electricity. So that's one thing that we need to make sure is that usually for end consumers, but also for industry, we have to get the lowest possible bill at the end of the day. And that, well, how can it be done? Well, basically with a lot of renewables. So the more renewables you put into a system, you could have a cheaper wholesale price. Now we have it quite high because we had a higher energy demand, expensive gas, high CO2 price. But in a system with a lot of renewables, we could put down the wholesale prices, and then very similar to heating costs. So it's not only the household has to pay electricity, but also heating, which is now also set to increase due to the increased gas prices. With electrification, it would require a higher capex, but overall, it will be more more beneficial in the longer term, financially looking. So really at one point trying to really go into electrification, but in a smart way where we could result with lower bills for end consumers, especially the ones that are the most affected by energy poverty. And the second one is just transition. What we have quite a lot in Eastern European countries, but also in Germany, is jobs that are at stake from the fossil fuel sector. So in the coal sector, in particular, we have many jobs at stake in Germany, in Poland, in Southeast Europe. So people who work in mines and all those skills are actually very valuable skills. So there are people who are familiar with the energy sector that can be very easily translatable to other sectors, but it's important to know that and plan that ahead. You cannot just expect them to change overnight. So also what we see now, there's a lot of work on how to make this a just transition, making sure that we can create new jobs, but at the same time not leave anyone behind in this energy transition without a job. So those are the two perhaps things that from a European perspective we're looking at quite carefully when it comes to
but
let's say
to
the
be
most
practical, sorry if I interrupt you, I still don't understand. Europe is the mother of all ethics, but finally, what are we doing for sharing this dream of clean energy with countries that are not allowed because they cannot afford it? Are there policies that have been done or put in place? Is there something in terms of the real engagement that is going in that direction, or no?
Yeah, we have two fields. So one is within European borders and one is outside of European borders. I was focusing now, let's say, most of the one within. But indeed, European countries have to do more, and we see this since the Paris agreement, but also coming up later now, that they're saying they're going to finance much more renewables in other countries. We have this discrepancy of basically financing costs being higher in other countries and being quite low in Europe. So a project, imagine the exactly same wind farm in Africa and in Germany with the same machines, same price tag, they're going to be at the end much more expensive in Africa because you have to pay higher financing costs. So because of this, we see some countries, in particular, let's say Germany, is doing quite well in terms of financing projects abroad, and now we see it also being interested in hydrogen. So basically looking to invest in Ukraine to develop facilities there, which would help the local population in terms of getting electricity at a cheap price, at the same time create a product, hydrogen, that would be consumed in Germany or in Europe.
Okay, so you want to say that basically if tomorrow comes a system that is a distributed system, it will make much faster to get to a more equal distribution of clean energy. Because you said a lot, we are thinking, we are creating, but I mean, it seems that is very far to come. And now I see that Benor is with us. I'd like Benor to say your word. What are you doing with this distributed thing about clean energy? We want to learn if there is a chance to make clean energy really equally distributed. You have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Nice to meet you. So yes, in Greeneum, basically what we develop is applications, decentralized applications that allow facilitate also sharing energy in the sense of distributing surplus energy. If you have solar panels on your facility, the possibility to transact it in a peer-to-peer manner transact the energy directly or transact also the certificate of the energy or the attributes related to this energy in a peer-to-peer manner between the community using blockchain application, using also analytics and advanced analytics. And our goal also is to facilitate, as you said, more financial services to where mostly energy is needed and there is a lack of financial possibility. And that could be, of course, in decentralized, in developing countries, or also in Europe, in East Europe, in places where the investments do not arrive so easy. So what Greeneum is doing is helping to facilitate all participants of the network eventually having access to energy in this way or another, and sharing more, getting statistics on the energy and accessibility.
Can you give us an idea of how it works, basically? Because I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with distributed systems, so it would be better if you could introduce how this could work with in the clean energy context. And I would also love to learn how you support blockchain as a sustainable thing, because we all come out from long discussions about the energy consumption of blockchain. So it would be probably necessary in this context to explain how can you think that blockchain can be a sustainable tool for making clean energy distributed, fairly distributed.
So when it comes to allowing peer-to-peer transactions, first of all, the blockchain intuitively fits to use for modeling and use cases in the energy sector, because our model of energy sector is to transact between ourselves energy. If you have an hotel and the hotel is producing solar energy, you want to share it with your environment, and you want to do it directly with the consumers without intermediate, exactly like the blockchain allow peer-to-peer transactions. So in that sense, we can quantify energy transactions. We can quantify them. We can encrypt them and write them on the blockchain in a secured manner that eventually will allow transactions to happen directly between consumer and producer of green energy at a certain time in the right moment. And that is very relevant to local markets. And that could also be eventually relevant in the global energy market, where energy traders or energy companies are trading. So we see today different initiatives where came up in Europe of creating energy chain, of allowing some platform that all energy companies could inject data and get validation of the data. And this validation is eventually written in a trustable manner that cannot be eventually changed, it is immutable, and also that we can have equally access to this data, everyone. So like today we are creating content and we are independent of only being relying on CNN or other channels for information. The same, it's the disruption happening today in the energy market, that we could be first independent ourselves energy-wise, first to be ourselves, have all our needs, whether it's in a commercial or residential aspect, but later on also to share our surplus energy at the right time with our community next to us, that we could help each other always to have enough energy and to sustain ourselves in a renewable manner that is not impacting the environment and which is with zero CO2 emissions.
I would open also to the floor if anyone has questions, because I can understand that maybe there are some topics that may be may need some more explanation. And certainly, Chris, Ivan, I would love you to interact and say your word about what everyone is supporting here. You may also disagree. Huh? That's the nicer thing of panels. The more you disagree, and the more the better is. So, anyone has any doubt that needs to be discussed?
I just want to add about the consumption of the energy of the blockchain. That's
please.
Yes, a main concern. We know that the Bitcoin and other proof of stake protocol demand enormous amount of energy, and it's a problem to scalable them, because even today the Bitcoin is using energy-wise, I think I've heard the latest statistics, the size of Austria or even more. So it's consuming a lot of energy, and it's not enough efficient if all of us will use it, because we want to use it for many applications and many use cases, including the energy. This is why there is a need, of course, to lower the amount of energy in the energy transaction, and also the logic of the blockchain, because it's opened for us a universe of possibilities of proof of stake and proof of authority and proof of location and proof of time and delegated proof of stake. In Greeneum, we have developed a proof of stake version to transact payments which are very in low transaction fees, and also allow energy applications. And IBM, for example, they have other approach of blockchain, and we see that this space is still growing, and it's like updating always our software system to a new software system, right? That is capable of more processing data in lower time and energy costs.
Did you prepare any video probably to show?
Yes, I have some video. If you guys want, I can. If you have some question, I am happy to answer. I can upload, and if I can share my screen,
you should be able to share your screen.
I did some video that describes a bit the market. It's 2 minutes. It's not so long, and let's see, share screens.
Then I'd like to take Ivan in. Maybe Ivan, you can tell us if there is any similar project in Europe that is under the monitor of stakeholders of the space. What is the relationship with distributed ledgers on part of other actors?
Yes, of course. I mean, there are different approaches when we come to the with or without blockchain. Not always it's include blockchain. Actually, in Germany, we have because we have a large solar community. We can see there is few initiatives to create a community sharing energy.
Heutzutage fragen sich viele Menschen, könnte dies der richtige Zeitpunkt sein?
Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
And we know there are there is an initiative coming from Australia that is using the blockchain, and a few initiatives also in Asia. And I will just explain some of
The future of energy is green. In the past 2 decades, we've replaced tons of fossil fuel energy consumption with sustainable alternatives. However, the sun doesn't shine all day. The wind comes and goes, but our energy needs are ever present and ever changing. Thus, fossil fuels are burned at will to satisfy uneven demand. Furthermore, unreliable predictions of green energy production increase its cost. Consider what could be accomplished if our power grids optimize the production and distribution of green energy. Consider the waste we can eliminate if we build smart power grids which forecast energy production and demand using artificial intelligence, help us prioritize carbon and sustainability credits, and consolidate reporting of energy consumption in real time. Welcome to the Greeneum Energy Network solution, driving down the cost of energy and encouraging a clean, green environment. By combining AI and blockchain smart contracts, we can optimize performance of solar and green projects and predict the demand for energy in a power grid. We can optimize renewable energy and power grids so there's always the right amount of energy available. This creates significant savings for energy distributors and renewable generators. Energy producers will get green token incentives for providing more green energy. Greeneum green certificates and tokens reward big energy companies as well as local producers, such as homeowners with solar cells on their roofs and farmers with wind turbines on their fields. Green tokens will enable consumers, producers, and distributors of green energy to directly trade with each other. Ultimately, this leads to cheaper, sustainable energy. Greeneum will decentralize the way energy is produced and traded, which is good for everyone and our planet. The Greeneum network will dedicate a share of its profits to the development of green power solutions. Greeneum's global platform will enhance energy production, efficiency, trading, and consumption. You can be among the first to contribute to Greeneum through our initial token offering. Be part of the green renewable revolution at greeneum.net.
So, yeah, this video was aimed to explain more about the possibilities, the use cases of the blockchain, and what we do in Greeneum in order to facilitate that. If you have some questions or you want to relate to some aspect.
Yes, we can take a few questions if any is there. Otherwise, we go through the questions that come from those who have sent questions in the application.
I think Lisa also raised her hand earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
I think I saw Lisa also raise her hand earlier. I don't know if she still had a question.
I did. Hi, Lisa Callahan. But mine wasn't related to that, so I didn't want to interrupt because that was so fantastic. It was more on Chris's presentation, so I didn't want to interrupt this. We changed gears completely, so I didn't want to interrupt this whole thought process. So I can wait and change gears or just ask the question. What would you like?
Go ahead, no problem.
Well, my question is regarding, I noticed on your slide 4, you had a delay, A to AB until you're round 5. And you said it revolves around opposition and all sorts of different areas. In the United States, that's a big hindrance. We have the capitalization, we have money, we don't even sometimes often have the actual infrastructure to the wind farm or to the solar system. But how, without going into complete detail with everything, can you give any advice on how you combat some of that sorts of different public relations, working with the government or any of that, because that seems to be a big hindrance here in many of the 10 plus solar systems and couple of wind farms I'm doing. That's a huge delay, is both federal, state, and county in it, what you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an important topic, and I'm also following a lot of I'm originally from the US, so I'm also following a lot of the developments there.
Yeah, and I knew you were. So, yeah.
But I think like in South Africa, it's a political industry, and if you look at who has funding in politics, traditionally it's typically been fossil fuel lobbyists, and especially in the US, that have financed certain politicians to make decisions and to slow down the renewable energy industry despite the prevailing economics that are working in its favor. So I think in terms of recommendations, we need to continue to tell the story about the renewable energy industry and explain the benefits, not just in terms of the cheaper cost, but the jobs that it's creating locally, within the states where those projects are located. Explain the environmental benefits. They'll reduce pollution. They'll reduce people that are getting sick from coal-fired power plants. I think help to sell the bigger business case for the industry.
Right. It just still seems that there are many delays still out there. They're happening, but it's everywhere definitely in the United States, where it's many different areas where there are delays, and this seems to be the bucket, the delay in getting this going. So, all right, thank you. That was it.
No problem.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got another question, about United States and the distribution of where things will happen, and it seems that the investment there are they may be delayed, but they are huge. So if we think of where things will happen and where people will be eventually be able to involve in the space, what do you think, Chris, Ivan, Assaf? What do you think is where should people look at in terms of a region?
When it comes to wind energy investments?
In terms of being involved in the space, considering the money that is around that space in certain areas.
Well, if we're talking about private investors, of course, we cannot recommend any investments. And if it's private people that would like to be more involved or have some investments, they can do it through their saving funds. And
no, well, the question was about work and not about investment, because of course we are not here for suggesting any kind of investment.
Work, where places to work. So first of all, the current administration in the US aimed for reaching 30 giga additional wind power along the coast of the United States, the East Coast and also on the West Coast. And this is for the coming years. There are huge projects and also calls to action to develop wind farm fields offshores in the United States, which is far away from its full potential. That's
I have got a doubt. So Europe is aiming to reach 32% of energy, clean energy consumption. And countries like the Northern Europe are around 50–60%, if I'm not wrong. So how do you see it? Why the rest of Europe is so far from the Northern Europe? Are we less green? Are we less? We have less investment. We are less ethical. What are we?
One is Mother Nature, and then what you just got as a country. So for instance, Norway or even Southeast Europe, they're blessed with a lot of good hydro potential. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they had the possibility to build up very big hydropower plants, which helped them integrate a lot of renewables, and they by themselves required then much less fossil fuel. So that's one thing. At the same time, it's also different mindset in terms of let's say the difference between growth, economic growth, and pollution. I think the Nordic countries were much more aware of the environment, and they were looking also, especially after the oil crisis in the 70s, they're already looking into diversifying their energy portfolio. So I think they're actually a couple of steps ahead, but the rest of Europe is catching up. And the only thing is, the sooner you start, the bigger the chance is that you have, let's say, the big companies, the Vestas of the world, to be in your country. To think that Denmark is a relatively small country, Yet the biggest manufacturer of wind turbines and the biggest developer that's developing offshore wind farms all around the globe, in the US, in Europe, in Asia, they're Danish companies. And this enabled because they entered so soon, and we see that being paid up now. But countries are picking up. In Europe, it's quite good that they have set European targets, and then they're basically obliged to come sooner than other countries. So we see some countries that were perhaps not so much interested into raising their share of renewables, but due to, let's say, facing fines, they were forced to go there, and now they see the benefits of it. So we see example, best one is Spain and Poland. Spain did a very big auctions for renewables in 2016, 2017, and then when they saw how cheap it gets, now they're doing regular auctions to award subsidies. Poland was also basically forced because they would miss their target. Poland relies dominantly on coal, and once they realized that they can have cheaper wind energy than electricity from coal, they changed the whole paradigm around wind energy, and now they're set to be one of the biggest European players when it comes to offshore wind.
Thank you. Making an effort in terms of, Chris, you told us about the jobs and the opportunities and where are the opportunities for people in the space, but making an effort, an imagination, an effort of imagination. How do you see emerging technologies emerging or being integrated in this space? Is there a future? How IoT, for example, could benefit, the clean energy space could benefit of integration with IoT?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential.
Any other emerging technologies? I'm thinking we are running a number of events around the latest technologies, and I'm wondering, is that just about manufacturing, or is there something else that could be done to take more people in and consequently accelerate the process towards a greener future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting technologies in this space that are changing the industry even today. Especially if you look at the more, we've been talking a little bit about the distributed industry, and if you look at the distributed energy industry, I think that market is growing on a different trajectory compared to the big utility scale projects, which tend to work on a government timeline and tend to be a bit slower. But when you're talking about customer-facing technology or peer-to-peer trading that uses blockchain, I mean, those types of technologies are evolving and being deployed even today. So it is an exciting space to watch, and I think it's going to continue to grow.
But is there? You said, well, both wind and solar are needed, but is there one of the two that is better and that can go farther?
Well, we take a look at just basic physics on when do you have more generation from one source versus the other. So we peak during the day at around noon with solar production, and during summer we have much more solar production, and wind, because wind speed is basically a function of it's correlated to temperature. So that the lower the temperature, the higher the wind speed is. So usually you're going to have higher production during night and higher production during winter. So once you combine the two of them together, they balance out so evenly, one to another, that it's actually a very good combination of the two sources. So obviously some countries will need more solar than wind, and vice versa. But it's all about making the right planning and see what type of demand you need in a particular country.
Anyone who want to add anything?
Just want to mention, yeah, in the northern countries, we see economies that have better infrastructure, allow easily integration of renewable energy into the electrical grid. and also easier management and regulations are more clear to support green energy integration from the government in the whole infrastructure. And Europe can do a lot to support the southern countries to deploy renewable energy, whether it's in France, that's it's still highly rely on nuclear energy, and there is a strong shift of mindset, of infrastructure, of regulation needs to happen there, of investment. And there is also a lot of interest from the French market, but it's not enough. Countries like Italy, they need more, and in Greece, that they have huge potential of wind and areas and sun, of course. And all the countries of the Mediterranean have huge potential to be self-sustained. And there is a need to help them in structuring it better, in facilitating better infrastructure, better technology, and it comes from the education. So it really needs to come from the public awareness and education, and bringing the public to ask for more, the regulator to change and to initiate the transition.
Well, we are operating in different. You're all from different regions, but it looks like that this is a game for the big ones. So for big, large institutions or organizations, who are the winner? Who could be the winners of this race? Who could be the giant that will govern the entire space, if any?
I think we will see new players because the space is also disrupted in allowing new providers to offer new solutions, whether it's on the software side and also on the infrastructure level. And of course, the big concerns, the energy companies that today manage the grid of Europe, they will stay part of the supply system, and in different countries, they just need to deploy new system models, deploy management for distributed systems. And if until today, they were both focusing on the generation and distribution, in the future grid, in the ideal, they need to move to the distribution management, where they reduce the amount of generation to the minimum and give actually the cities, the communities, the industry, the private sector to be the provider, the generator of the energy for its own economical and consumption needs. So it is the responsibility on the English companies and private sector to support and participate in the energy sector and be self-sustained, whether it's offices, whether these are hotels, whether these are smart homes, and deploying public areas, public schools with solar systems. So eventually I see it coming both from up to down, from the big players in the market down, but also a lot from the private sector, from the public up. The request, the demand, the interest, the content, it's all bringing eventually building up an industry and new jobs that needs to be around this industry, in marketing, in engineering, in financials. So there is a lot of work to do. We are still
there is a lot of work to do on that, a lot of innovation that is coming through. So I'm wondering, smart cities are coming, and in the meantime, these huge investments in wind farms, etc., are growing. How will these elements integrate, or do we risk it to waste the time and money because evolution run in parallel and not together? that's an open question to everyone. I'm definitely curious to know your point. My perspective for what I am involved in is that integration is key, and that there is no more a technology that can live alone, but requires to be integrated into the entire context. So I'm wondering, it looks like the space is a little bit isolated. Am I wrong?
I think now it's more than ever going from isolated to co-located and different technologies working together. Because I think once we started the energy transition, we're just, let's say, scratching the surface, trying to replace a bit of coal, a bit of oil with some renewables. And now we're in the process where we're planning for 100% renewable countries. And there it really requires really good planning when it comes to how to make sure that not only I have completely clean electricity, but I have completely clean transportation infrastructure, how to make sure that the grid ends up running, how to combine basically those sectors all together, how to integrate planning for heating, cooling, industrial processes. So now we're in the phase where wind players are not only wind players, they also develop solar together, they also develop storage together. So we see actually the ones that are going to benefit the most are the ones that bundle their products or technologies together, and that way they can offer the most benefits.
Is it true that there is all these partnerships around, Chris? Tell me.
Well, I was just going to add on to what Ivan was talking about, specifically when it comes to storage. I think that as an emerging technology that does have the capacity to overcome some of the challenges we've seen with the trade-offs of solar and wind and the time of day. Once you have sufficient storage technology or sufficient transmission distribution networks, you can easily overcome those time of day production challenges. So I think that's an exciting space to watch as well. And in terms of the winners that we want in this industry, or the winners that we're expecting, I think we're trying to build an industry that moves away from one big monopoly winner like we've had previously with the utility monopolies. We're trying to move to a more distributed system where the customers are ultimately the ones that are winning, and everyone's winning if they're participating in the system, either generating their own electricity with solar on their roofs, or helping to be an off-taker for that electricity and use clean energy. So there's all different ways to participate in this, and I think the future is hopefully everyone wins.
Yeah, that's a nice vision. Tell me just one thing. Who managed the data? What are the data that come out from any clean energy project, and who will manage those data? If eventually we come to a point where there is a kind of a distributed context or integrated set of technologies across countries, at that point there will be a bunch of data, quite interesting, I have to say, and I'm wondering who will be going to manage them and how will they be protected? Well, is a more technical question, probably. Yes, but I'm just curious to know if there is something going on in terms of thoughts or ideas or policies or whatever.
I mean, this may be more of a question for Ben, but I mean, in terms of the customer data, hopefully a lot of that will be up to the customer if they want what they want to share. And beyond that, I would imagine a lot of this could be open source data in different markets. So if it's not tied to privacy related data from a customer, then anyone should be able to have access to that data in my view.
So eventually the owner of the data is also being decentralized in a way that we own it. and more regulations, especially in Europe, will come up first of all, you give permission to who you want to share the data with, who is your provider, and there should be enough providers that you could switch provider, and what is the necessary data that you need to share, and what are already data which is private, and entering the smart metering era, where actually every energy transaction is being tracked. There is a big concern also to data privacy issues, because basically it's in order to manage our homes, we will also give permission to understand every transaction happening to our home. When do we open our laundry? When do we watch TV? And what exactly, which equipment we use at home? And that's data privacy issues, and it's still under debate in Europe. In what term we should allow the utilities, the energy industry to know about us, where is the limit, what is really necessary. This is still under discussion. Many things needs to be still regulated and written, and there is a lot of place for the regulator to draw the line. There are cybersecurity aspects that companies will need to have in order to use your data, to be your provider, and also there is a regulation to delete your data in case that you prefer to move to switch to another provider, and that's also needs to be regulated. So
sorry, a lot of regulation that should come in. It will take ages, very probably, and in the middle we don't know really what will be going on. So I've got a last question before the final remarks. What do you think the role of companies, of common companies, not producer or companies involved in the clean energy space, but those that eventually benefit of energy? What should be the role, and how would do you see companies planning for a future that is more clean energy driven? Will we have companies with an officer in charge of thinking how energy is utilized within the company, or will they need or will they manage or consider new structures? What do you think? How do you think the clean energy space will impact companies wherever they are?
We see it already with basically the companies that are not, as you said, that they're not energy companies, but they consume energy and they depend. Energy is a big part of their basically bill for a product or a service they produce. So the companies that do everything related to data in terms of the Googles, the Microsoft of the worlds, they need electricity, they need energy in general, and we see them already years ago, but we're still in the process that they are looking to source their electricity completely renewable, and also move all their operations to be completely renewable. We see in a lot of those companies, they're basically designating, I would say, chief energy officers, so people who have to be in charge on structuring those very big deals. So we don't talk about a simple yes or no contract between two parties, but we talk about a deal of basically what we had now in the Netherlands, for example, where a pharmaceutical company is buying off half of an offshore wind farm in order to consume that electricity for its operations. So this is, we see that they usually sign a power purchase agreement, so a bilateral contract between a producer and a seller, and between a buyer and a seller. And we see that increasing absolutely rapidly over the last 5-6 years. It started actually off quite a lot in places which are not so much regulated regarding those contracts. So a lot in the Nordics, but also the UK. And now we see that expansion also coming up in Europe. And definitely this is going to increase because those type of contracts, they last for 5, 10, 15, in some cases 20 years, and they offer low prices at which those companies can secure electricity. So competitive, from a competitive angle, it's definitely something important, and basically everyone who wants to be competitive globally has to look at their energy costs and how to reduce them, and that's why this will definitely be a new frontier for SMEs and in general any other company.
Thank you. So lots of things that will be going on in that space. So last thought, well, not forever, just for today. Who want to start? Chris.
Sorry, this is Laura. You said this is the last spot. Just to sum up.
It's not the last thought for today. So what is your, how do you want to involve the audience and those who will look at this video in the next month? How do you want to suggest them to think of about clean energy and their future with clean energy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's good to, going back to my presentation, follow what's happening at COP26 if you want to see kind of what the future trends are going to be in terms of what companies are making commitments for clean energy procurement, to build on what Ivan was talking about, as well as what countries are setting policy goals to set targets for the renewable energy industry. So looking at those kind of high-level goals that come out of that, I think will be worth following. And then, yeah, if other people want to upskill themselves in this space, I put some links in my slides as well to other resources online for free online courses, if you're interested in working in this space. So I think those are good places to start.
Right.
Right.
Thank you very much. Ivan?
Well, I think, yeah, the future is renewable, and now we're going to go in that direction. But we have a lot of technologies today, and many other are going to come up. So we're not there yet. There's going to be still a lot of work in R&D. There's still a lot of work to be done in very different spheres of the energy transition. So not only on the supply side or the generation side, but also in the middle grids. I think we didn't talk much about grids, but grids are going to be, they had to basically, we have to see the resurrection in terms of how much they're going to be installed each year. We had a peak, and now we've been very lazy actually with installing grids, especially in Europe. And this has to go back up. So definitely there's going to be a lot of work. I would say it's going to be a global construction site. There's going to be a lot of activity because we need to change quite a lot. And overall, I think with wind energy, what's going to be an effect is we're going to see perhaps a slower movement of rural populations to urban areas, because wind farms usually they pay local taxes, so it goes to the local budget of rural areas. So perhaps with wind energy we can slow down a bit the disappearance of the rural parts of the world.
Thank you very much. Then are your thoughts?
I just summarize, we move from global to local when it comes to energy, local production close to the consumption site. We want to shorten the distance. We want to produce about of rooftops, in our balconies, on public areas that are free. And there are the 4 Ds that the market is going in this direction, which is the decarbonization of the market, the decentralization of the distribution of the energy sources, the democratization of the energy market to allow more participants to take part in selling energy, in being energy player. And the 4th D, do you know what is it?